BRAAMs. You know the sound. Those more heavy brass, if not synth tones that just hit and slap really hard with the loud low note. They're really cool, and the awesome folks at Pianobook are putting together a competition to put together the world's biggest BRAAM. It's pretty exciting. This is a wonderful community of samplers and composers. I've mentioned them loads of times on this channel before, and it's always fun when they do something like this as a community, come together and create a sample library with everyone's submissions, which is really awesome. So I'm going to quickly show you what I've done for it today, and in the process hopefully give you some sound design tips. Hey, my name is Steve, composer, engineer, and lecturer, and welcome back to the channel. Now, the funny thing is, I'm actually recording this video after I've recorded 4 other videos and lined them up. Those videos will be coming out over the next couple of weeks, some exciting stuff there. But I really needed to record this video and release it as part of the community event at Pianobook. Funny thing is, between then and now, I've actually got my hair cut. So enjoy that continuity error when those videos come out in a couple of days. But for now, what we're going to actually dive into is looking at the BRAAM I've created for the Pianobook community library. Let's get stuck in. What they're actually looking to do with this competition is put together the world's biggest BRAAM library, that sound that's famous from the early 2010s, from Inception, the movie, of course. Arguably from the trailer as well. I mean, there's a little bit of debate around who created it and whose idea it was, but it's definitely that movie. Now, all a BRAAM is a loud, hard hit of a low something, like a low note. Could be a synthesizer, could be strings, it could be brass, it's often brass. But anything that's low and hard and a big rumble. It's often distorted, often gritty, very aggressive, and a really cool thing to make as a sound designer. Now with this competition, they wanted you to go out, grab a sound, record it, and then mangle it to your sort of taste. Or you could just record a sound that actually naturally is a BRAAM. If I think about the car park at work, I'm pretty sure if you take a trombone into there and just play a really loud low note, it is automatically a BRAAM with that reverb. But I decided I was actually going to take a look back over the year at all of the libraries that I've actually submitted to Pianobook for free, which you can download. And I'm going to take samples from those and use them in this BRAAM. It's a nice way to, I think, wrap up the year of Pianobook. So let's take a look at what I came up with. So this is my finalized BRAAM, all the different layers that I've mangled or made or created, and they've been put together into one low hit lasting about 10 seconds. I really like it. I think it came off pretty well, which is surprising a little bit because a lot of the libraries that I've released are not aggressive libraries or aggressive sounding gritty textures. A lot of them are quite smooth, subtle, warm flavors. So it's an interesting sound design challenge to kind of turn that into a BRAAM. So let's dive in and take a look at what I did. I actually started with this very simple idea. I took a string sound from my Ambido library, which is a string synth library, and just tuned it to the right note, which we're all doing to B. So I just tuned it to a B1, and then just basically put a fade out and a huge reverb trail on it. So if we solo that one up, all I've done is add some RAAM, which is a wonderful reverb, and it's just really given a sense of space and sound. So if I take that reverb off, a really simple sound, but if I add that reverb in, just adds like an extra little layer or detail or extension of the sound and rounds it out in a sense of space, which is really cool. You could do this sort of technique quite easily to create a BRAAM. You just kind of take something, tune it, and add simple effects like delays or reverbs to add a sense of space. So take something that's already low and aggressive and just add it into a sense of space. However, you can mangle the sound further. Let's take a look at this group soft brass, for example. I'm going to just play it without any of the plugins. It is a really simple patch, basically a simple note. And I actually just time stretched it a little bit just to give it a sense of smoothness, to make it a little bit less gritty. Added some fade ins and some fade outs. Very simple. But then I just dressed it up with some plugins and some further effects processing. When you look down here, I've got a filter going, which is just a simple high or low pass filter. I can't remember. We'll take a look in a minute. I've got some distortion going through, some extra distortion going through, and then some reverb as well. So let's take a look at how these all sound. Turning on the filter, you'll actually notice when I play it back, there's some automation going. If you open up my automation lanes, you can see there that there's some filter sculpting here. There's also this happening as well, and that is attached to my distortion. I wanted my sound to get a little bit gritty. Essentially, when creating a BRAAM, you have to think about the different stages within your BRAAM. There's the initial hit, there's the sustained note, there's sometimes like a bit of an aftershock, and then there's the little sort of tailing out textures at the end. And I've created different sounds for all of these different elements. This particular one was my aftershock. So I wanted it to sort of hit and then have like this sense of sound coming back off a wall or something like that. So I took that sound and I made it into a sort of wavy type texture using the filter and this distortion. So you can see the dry wet knob there adjusting to the sound that I wanted to create. And that really worked well together with the frequency as well. So you can see both of them following a similar sort of automation path. It started to build that little kind of aftershock. Still need to be a bit more aggressive though, and certainly in a lot more space. And that's where the next two plugins come in. So I added some Decapitator, another fantastic plugin of distortion. So basically the Coldfire distortion plugin is driving into the Decapitator, which is then distorting it even further. And then some RAAM thrown on top as well to add a little bit of space to it. And that created my aftershock. So when you add it with the initial sample that we made, now we've got a sample that starts us off, and then as it starts to die away, we get the aftershock coming in. Now I felt like we needed some attack, so we need something to punch at the beginning. And this is where things got a little bit interesting. So in my library Flow-Along, I had some synth-like plucks. So they're just sort of like a plucky type texture from a synthesizer. I thought this could be quite good to kind of emulate a kick drum or a hit of some kind. But one of the best things to do is to kind of take a hit and detune it to make it sound like it's a drum. So it goes boo sort of sound. So I actually threw it into a sampler. I just threw the sample straight in, mapped it to the right key. So then I had a playable sample across the scales. Simple, the Flow-Along pluck just kind of mapped out in a sampler so I could play it again. What I then decided to do is map the pitch to envelope 2 and make it sweep down. So every time I hit the note, it went down a whole octave. So this sort of created a really good texture because now I've got that sort of shape to the drum kit, this sort of sound, that drum do type sound that I'm after. I didn't need the high frequencies though, so I popped in a little low pass. But you know, like it by itself is pretty tame. I needed to definitely get some aggressive distortion happening on this. So thanks again, Coldfire, and this is what I got. Really crunchy, really aggressive, which was great. I then bounced that out to audio because I often quite like processing with audio, just to kind of hang over to the way I prefer to work. But you know, I could have kept it in MIDI for sure. But that's how I ended up with this. I just added a little bit of a fade out and threw on the RAAM reverb again, and here we go. Now that gave me most of the sound that I was going to be working off. That gave me the attack, and then I had the soft sustain note that continued that low frequency from the strings, and then my aftershock. So that all together is starting to sound like this. Starting to get there, starting to sound good. Then I threw in some extra textures. So I used my kind of classic techniques like time, pitch stretching, processing through different sort of audio effects. Let's take a quick look at some of those. So I took this sound from my granular fibers library, and I threw on some of the EFX fragments from Atura here. It's kind of a granular synth processing. And just on a preset called decomposition, created some interesting effects. So I found I really liked this particular section, so I bounced it out to audio. And then really slowed it down. I felt like it sounded like a bike coming to a stop at the end there. I thought it was a really cool texture. So then I took that sound up here, I faded it in, faded it out, and added some effects. Things like micro shift and EQ, just to sculpt out some of the sound and spread it out to a more stereo width. I added on this Valhalla Supermassive, which sounded gorgeous, this beautiful warping type delay texture, and then shaped it with a filter as well. And that's how we ended up with this sound. So it starts up high in the high frequencies, and as the filter opens up, we can hear that kind of type sort of sound, if that makes sense. The warped delay just kind of creates a bit of a shimmer, which is quite nice. The filter is sculpting that journey frequency wise to kind of match the slowing repetitions as the speed dropped. Just a really cool kind of like icing on the top of the cake. It's something that you notice at the end of the BRAAM that you didn't necessarily know was there or was going to be there when you started it. There was also this reverse delay system that I did over here. So on this one, I took these two samples, very basic sort of samples from my Kaleidosky library. Did some further processing, again micro shift in order to make that kind of stereo sort of sound. I soothed it a little bit, used soothe just to kind of reduce some of the harsher resonances, and added in some Valhalla delay just to kind of give a little bit of a shimmer. I found this particular preset that was just really, really cool. So I then took that and added that in as a light little texture here. And then for some final textures, I used a new plugin that I got recently called Novum. I have to thank Venus Theory for this one. He recommended it on his channel, and it is an awesome granular synthesis effects kind of plugin. It's just fantastic. What I did is drop one of my samples from my Melosaur library into this and broke it apart so I could only have one particular texture. And it's just really, really cool because then you can separate out all of these different sections. It's doing its granular synthesis thing. It's sort of, you know, taking little grains and stitching them together, but now you can control the whole spectrum. Check that out. So that as it was giving me something along the lines of this. So I just zeroed into the part that I wanted, created a single note, and then bounced that out to audio. And that is when I was left with this line. I then also did that to another sample as well from one of my other libraries, and that's what gave me these two lines together. Barely audible lines that just add a little bit of depth and detail. Because if you think about your BRAAM being played on a huge cinematic soundscape, you're going to have time potentially to hear all those details, and the volume's going to be there to be able to hear all those details. So it's nice to have those little things buried at the sides, or, you know, to create a more depth and impactful sort of hit. So that's a really quick look at some of the things that I did. A lot of effects processing that basically falls into three categories. One, just manualing the sample and adding effects processes. So reversing, time stretching, pitching up, pitching down, stretching out, adding effects like reverbs, delays, distortions. That's one way to go about it. Number two is throwing into a sampler one of your previous samples and then being able to play that across your keyboard to see how it sounds pitched up or pitched down. It's very similar to mangling it in the DAW yourself, but you're just using a sampler to do it for you, which you can then throw audio effects and all sorts of things onto there. And then the third is that extreme sort of processing in apps like Novum that can really kind of change the sound completely by deconstructing it and changing it entirely, which is really, really cool. And all of that together gives you this. So I hope you enjoyed that, a little bit of a deconstruction into my BRAAM, and I hope that you're actually kind of contributing one too. It's always an exciting and fun thing to do some sound design. If you're normally composing or writing music or performing, you don't often get the chance to sort of sit down and think about sound and how to kind of mangle it into something new. So it's always a fun exercise, definitely something I'd encourage. It's due in at like on the 30th of November or something, so you kind of gotta get in quick, but I'm sure if you join in on Pianobook's next challenge, it could be equally exciting too. As I said, I've already recorded with some longer hair, extra videos that will be coming out soon, and they'll be across over the next couple of weeks. So why not subscribe to check out those videos when they drop? So smash that subscribe button on your way out, but otherwise I will catch you in the next one.